thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Oh, I shouldn't say that really, this afternoon and this evening and this morning. It's an absolute pleasure to have Andrew Chiu back to present for us. He's presented for quite a few iMoots now, and he's also a neighbour of mine now. I live in Hong Kong, and it's fabulous to have him presenting today. And he is definitely a person who knows a lot about Moodle and a lot about working in the school environment and how they can work or not work together. Over to you, Andrew.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming along. I apologize, I was just going through a couple of my slides just before. I don't know if they all came across to the PDF version very well, so it was a little bit rushed to do this. I had this idea that this is a conversation that I regularly have with staff here. They talk about, you know, can't we just have one system? Which is the best thing? Should I be on Moodle or should I be on Google? So I thought it might be quite good as that conversation continues to kind of put together some of the things that I found using both. So yeah, my name's Andrew. I'm the education coordinator at the that's me. So the big question that I want to know from everybody right now is just where you're from, and hopefully I'll make this a little bit interactive. I don't know if that whole window gets in your way, but what is your role? A for teacher or educator, B for a tech admin person, C for a developer, D for another, to get a good idea we have in the room. And if you've done that, then maybe you can type into the chat where you are from. So that's, hoping that's pretty much everyone. So looks like we've got one teacher and one developer and two others. So I'm wondering what the others are. It's always interesting to get some others. And just a quick poll to see how many of you have been using Moodle and for how long. It's always an interesting one. I've been using Moodle for, it will be 10 years. It'll be, yeah, this will be my 10th year using Moodle. Good forever, too long, fantastic. 8 or 9 years, Andy, great. Ellen, so okay. Administrator, yeah. 4 years, fantastic. 8 years at tech, fantastic. Right. And yes, that, you know, I see a lot of teachers sort of moving into, whether they know it or not, they're sort of moving into online learning designing as well. This is the other question. So, do you use Google Apps or Google Classroom? So just to gauge, Google Apps, Google Classroom, do you use it, do you not? How long have you been using it for? Fantastic. Google Apps, not okay. Great, Tom. Okay. Fantastic. Okay. So let me just introduce you to our school. We have 800 students here at the American International School in Hong Kong. We've had Moodle running along for about, I think it's in its 12th year here. And we've been a Google school for almost as long. Predominantly, every student and family that comes in, we give a Google email account to, and that gives them access to Google Docs as well as the email and a number of other things. And as Google Classroom has grown, and as well as Google Docs and the collaborative tools and that, and as we've been able to bring in sort of Wi-Fi and bring your own device sort of technologies into the hands of our students, then the use of Google Apps and Google collaborative tools has been a really great tool for us. But in the back there, we've also always had Moodle, particularly in the middle school and the high school. And our Moodle use is such that the high school, every course is on Moodle, and we use the Moodle Gradebook as our main gradebook. In fact, this time, actually it should be today or Monday. It was originally today, it's been pushed back to Monday. I actually take all of the Moodle grades out of the Moodle Gradebook and put them across to our reporting system. So we have a very high adoption of Moodle, but probably an even higher adoption of Google apps just because they're available to everyone. So that's the background here. And so the big question is, does Moodle win? Does Google win? What are the big options here available to teachers? And in my role as EdTech coordinator, I work every day with quite a lot of different teachers, all the way from early childhood through to grade 12. And definitely we see a big variety in use of Moodle and Google. Moodle predominantly at the middle and high school level, but Google goes all the way down to early childhood. We've got kids blogging at the age of 4 through some of the schools. And Google goes all the way up to grade 12 as well. So, so what I hope to share here is, just some of the things that I've seen and that I've used as a teacher, and hopefully allow you to learn a little bit more about the difference in the two. And I hope to end with, how maybe the two can be used together to be a really powerful learning environment. So here we go. Big question for you guys first before I go into Moodle and Google. What are your top 3 features of Moodle? So think through. Somebody said, look, tell me 3 things why you use Moodle or why we should use Moodle for education. What would be your top 3 or fewer features? We'll give everybody a couple minutes to answer that question. Okay, so administer training, great. Great ones, Trish. Great, controlling release of training based on student completion of activities. Okay. Fantastic, Dom. Yes, yes, yes. Delivery of training to remote users, good. Question bank, forums, okay, self-study options. Fantastic. Vinny, I hope you're putting in your top 3 too. Good. So I'm going to share with you what I think my top, it's probably a little bit more than 3 here. I started with 3 and I had to add a couple more. Yeah, good, containing all the records. So Moodle is a very powerful, a really powerful sort of system. And my first one I always talk about with teachers is that it's, I don't like to say teacher-centered, but it is in our school. It's the teacher-centered. It's your teacher's friend. It's teacher-centered tool. And I'll go into some of these in more detail. So reusable elements, flexible groups, conditional pathways, and admin tools. So I've started to list some things here that maybe Google doesn't do as well. But definitely, as a teacher's friend, Moodle is that virtual equivalent to what you might have as, your desk, your teacher's desk, where you get all your assignments in, how you're tracking all the students. There are very few applications out there that can do and track like you need as a teacher, and also offer out, like you might have a whiteboard behind you, you might have assignments that you hand out to students. That is the space that Moodle occupies in the virtual area. And there are very few tools that can do that. And a lot of people say, hey, what about Google Classrooms? Well, Google Classrooms, and I've got a little list here, you have a student list, you can email your students, you can do some simple grading, but it does lack a lot of those things that a teacher really needs to help guide, facilitate, however you want to teach your students all the way through a course. So some of the things I've listed here: groups, groupings you can't do in Google Classrooms, flexible gradebook, cohorts, so over the years. Conditional learning pathways is a great one. Completion tracking, badges, attendance you can take on Moodle. Analytics, these are sort of things that you have on Moodle that maybe you can't do with purely a Google system. Of course, you can hack around it, you can have your own spreadsheet or whatever, but Moodle offers for us a really great, comprehensive, teacher-centered tool to do the teaching, to fulfill your teaching role to a very high standard. Other things that I've noticed with Moodle and Google over the few years that we've had Google Classroom is the reusable elements in Moodle. You can import, you can export, so you can share your whole Moodle course. You can take it with you and bring it back up in another school, that sort of thing. You can hide and show activities and courses. You can reset your course, so every year it's ready to go again. Every little tweak that you've made, I think that really helps. That's definitely how we've seen Moodle grow, with teachers being able to build slowly over the years into some really exciting, challenging courses. And then it provides you those kind of analytics over the years. So how did my kids do this year? How did my kids do last year? And really analyze and reflect on how you're going as a teacher. So these are some of the things that Moodle's great at. Flexible groups and roles. So Google Classroom, in a minute I'll show you some of the great things about it, but it doesn't have the ability to group up your students within a class. There are ways to sort of, maybe you make 2 or 3 different Google Classrooms for each group. And there are also some Google plugins that help with that kind of management. But it doesn't allow you to group your students together and therefore differentiate. So one of the most powerful things in Moodle is being able to identify different groups and provide them each with different resources or different learning pathways, different learning activities. Empowering your students. So the idea of the role in Moodle is an amazingly powerful thing. So a lot of teachers don't get to that point where you're using it, but if you want to think about how a teacher can become more a facilitator, how we can take some of the great things that teachers do and pass them over for students to do, maybe the easiest sort of example might be having a forum whereby you have some students take control over that forum to monitor it or facilitate the things in there. So you provide them with some extra roles or abilities, capabilities for them to monitor the conversations on the forum, that sort of thing. You can do it at every single level in every activity in Moodle. And then multiple teachers and facilitators. We often have, substitute teacher come in, or even we have some different roles within our organization, and we're able to give them varying degrees of access to our courses through Moodle. So there's some very powerful structures there. Conditional pathways. This is one of my slides that didn't come out too well after being PDF'd. So the idea that you can really personalize what's happening for your students, so you can offer them some self-paced, differentiated activities. So they could score, they could do a quiz, and based off of that quiz, if they did really well, then they move on to the more challenging activities, or if they don't do as well on that quiz, perhaps they need some extra help. So you can build all of that into Moodle using the conditional, the restricting access, using your activity completion elements in each of the activities. You've also got your groups, as we've mentioned, and your groupings. You've also got this idea of gamification with your badges. So this is a little picture. You probably can't see it very well, but there's a whole load of badges there that I have in one of the courses that we run for some of our orientation. So those are some of the things with Moodle that are really powerful, that sometimes when people really look at, if you've come from Moodle, if you've really thought about teaching and you have been teaching in a virtual environment for a while, you really look at Google and Google Classroom and go, really, can it offer all the things that I really want to grow into. So this is the Moodle tool. Joy Setsinger sort of made this one, and it has down on one side the Bloom's taxonomy, and it goes through every single sort of activity or resource in Moodle, and it lets you know sort of, how does it work for doing different elements of Bloom's, how does it work for, can it assess student learning, is there information transfer in it? So a really interesting thing to look at and see. I've got the full one somewhere. But for now, that the idea that there's a lot that's packed into Moodle, and sometimes it's a bit untapped, and definitely that the idea that it's flexible. A few of you mentioned flexible. If there's any tool out there for teachers that can bend to whatever way you want to teach or run your teaching and learning, Moodle would be the one tool that sort of you make it do whatever you want it to do. So that though brings with it some complexity. So when we move on to Google, and I've only really got one slide for Google because it almost mirrors exactly how Google for Education really is. It's very fast, it's thin, and it's productive. It gets the job done without a lot of overhead. So you've got these integrated Google products, you've got all of the Google Apps stuff that's all developed there, and you've got this user interface that just works. There's a very sort of low learning curve with the Google products. They have a whole section. If you've ever looked on developing for Google, they have a whole website dedicated to how you design for Android, for the web, for Google plugins. So they basically get you right up to developing at that sort of user interface level that makes it easy for everyone. So a similar sort of a thing, this is from Kathy Schrock, so looking at Bloom's taxonomy and the Google products. I think one of the greatest things about Google for Education is there are so many products, and they are so used by our students and by the teachers already. They're familiar with a lot of them. So if you look around, you've got, so this is Bloom's here, starting with remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. And you'll see Google Sites, YouTube, Blogger, there's Street View and Maps in there. There's your Chrome browser, Google Search, Photos, things that people are already very familiar with. And then what we're doing is we're able to get up and running with our teaching and learning very quickly, and building in those tools that students are familiar with and getting straight into the learning. So I think out of what Google provides to us is this very quick way in to a digital environment. And particularly we've rolled out Chromebooks in our school as well, in the elementary, and it's been a very easy road in with the Chromebooks. So there's a whole ecosystem there. So I'm just going to go through very quickly some of these things, a few elements that as a teacher I sort of see using Moodle and Google. So when you're creating your virtual classroom, what does it look like? I've got, I don't know if you can see these very well. Is this zoom in? I'm trying to see if I can zoom in here. Don't know. Anyways, on the left side I've got Moodle, and on the right side I've got a typical Google Classroom. One of the things, this is just a completely zoomed out picture, but I think you can see a lot of things from this. With your Moodle, each of these is an activity or resource, and each of these has had to be created by the teacher. Click turn editing on, and then add the activity, then it takes you to another page, then you're entering the details of it. Some of it gets very quick when you're used to it, but it's still a lot to set up, and it does take a long time to plan out a course. Now what it also means is, though, every activity and resource here is something for a student to do. So if you look in this one page, we've packed in a whole load of activities. That could be, this is a whole unit worth of work right here, so probably about 4 weeks worth of work. In Google Classrooms, you've got this little plus button down the bottom. You click on it and you can add only 3 things. Is my next slide? These are the 3 things you can add. You can create an announcement, you can create an assignment, you can create a question, and that's pretty much it. And what it allows you to do is it's very quick. You're able to add, so each one of these boxes is one of those activities, announcements, assignments, and you can attach files to it very quickly, and students can comment on that very quickly. So you've got this stream that's looking a little bit more like Facebook. So the Google Classroom appeals to a lot of teachers who are working very quickly. So if you look at the Google side, you've got your 3, as opposed to Moodle, this is just a few at the top, and you scroll down, and obviously there's a load more activities. So it really appeals to that teacher who's working on the fly, who's you know, having to get things up and running, who might be adapting to the class a lot more. Whereas your Moodle course tends to be more for that kind of teacher who's really thinking through and developing a learning experience, and some of it might be very much you know, on Moodle. Blended learning style sort of thing. That's sort of the kind of teaching and differences that we see. So I'm going to go to the next slide. You know, creating assignments and your teacher workflow. So in Moodle, your assignments, you say, hey, create an assignment, and you've got all these options, and there are fantastic options in here. So deciding when it's open, when it's a due date, and when you actually cut off submissions. You can't cut off submissions in Google Classroom. You've got different feedback types, you've got different submission settings, whether they submit something online, whether it's whether they type something in, whether it's offline, whether they're submitting a file. You've got different group submission settings. You've got how they're notified, grading, and how things are graded. You've got a whole load of options there, whether it's a scale, whether it's a rubric. In Google Classroom, you're basically stuck with a number. You can say what it's out of, and that's about it. Outcomes, so you can link it with outcomes. You've got this idea that this activity can be restricted based off of what the student has done, or time, or so you've got these conditional pathways. You've got activity completion in there to say how you can decide whether this activity is completed, and how that links in with the rest of your course. So you don't have as many options at all with Google, and I'm just going to skip that so I'll come back to it. So in Google Classroom, when you create an assignment, this is what it looks like. You've got you basically type in the title, you've got any instructions that you need, and then you might set a due date. They've just introduced topics, so topics allow you to filter your big stream. It becomes a really big stream if you develop it through the year. And then you can attach your documents. Now the great thing here is, obviously for Google, it integrates in with your Google Apps. So if I attach a Google document here, it can be a template, and I can decide to make a copy for each student, which is a fantastic tool if we end up working in our Google Docs, as a lot of our schoolwork does happen to end up in. This is a fantastic way to make sure that all those documents are shared with me, that I don't lose out, you know, that I don't have this issue with kids having to copy it, or kids actually typing into a template if a teacher hasn't fixed up the sharing settings properly. So this is a fantastic tool, and this is probably one of the #1 reasons why teachers like moving over. It's a very quick win. You can attach your template and say that, make a copy for each student. Coming back though, in Google, how we do run it is this is the assignment view of inside Moodle. So as a teacher, you might come in and each student has submitted their assignment. You can still run it with Google Docs. What I used to do before Google Classroom came around, and I still work with this quite regularly, is I expect them to attach the link to their document as their assignment submission. So they're not necessarily typing up their work there, they're doing all their work in Google Docs, and then they're attaching a submission. So it can work, but you still have some issues around sharing docs. You often have some students haven't shared them properly, etc. Are there any questions so far? Are we going okay? I hope I'm not rushing through things too quickly. Looking further on with the Google Classroom. So one of the things with Google Classrooms is you've got apps on your, you can grade it online, but you can also grade it as an app from the Classroom app on an Android phone or an iOS. And one of the great things that it allows you to do, it's a new feature, but in the iOS app, if you open up an assignment, it could be a Google Doc or anything, there'll be a little pen and because you're on a device where you can actually write or with your finger or with a stylus or something, it puts you into a writing mode, and you can actually annotate up straight over the student's work, but you can also type things in as well, which is this is just a little sample here, but that same document you're able to annotate right on your iPad or your Android tablet or even your phone, which is a great little addition. Moodle, you've got that on the website. They've started to, I think it's 3.0 or 3.1. Some of you might be able to correct me. I haven't used the annotation feature of a PDF, but you've got to get the students to first submit a PDF, and then you're annotating over it on a on the web browser, which is not always the easiest, with your mouse. But it's a good example of how Google designs things as well. So you're on a device where you have a stylus, you can do it. When you're on the web browser where you're probably working with a mouse, you don't have that ability, but you're able to get straight into the Google Doc and use the commenting tools and everything in Google Docs. Next thing, so one of the big benefits, once you've done your grading, you'll realize in Google Classrooms that you hit a big wall. You do your grading, but it doesn't go anywhere. You can export all of your grades from Google Classrooms as a Google spreadsheet, but then you still got to work out your categories, or you're probably copying and pasting it into another system. So with Moodle, one of the great features is the flexible gradebook. This is actually a snapshot of the setup from one of our AP, so grade 12 level English courses. And I really truly believe you can probably do any type of grading you like with the Moodle Gradebook. We've hacked around all sorts of interesting things. So in this one, we've got different categories. So for example, you've got your language category here and your essay category, and there's a few other categories. The teacher's able to set that it's worth 10, and here it is a percentage, so it's 10%. They all add up to 10, so they're able to weight your different categories. Within the category, you're able to put in your different assignments and your tests. But you're also able to weight those, so you can see there's a pre-grammar test here and a progress test, and these are weighted more, so 2 weighted more, weighted more than the others. So you have a lot of control, and you're able to tweak as you go along. So as you grade on Moodle, as you enter the grades, and some of these might be straight out of quizzes, you're able to keep track of the grades and let Moodle take care of all the number crunching. You don't have to worry about that spreadsheet. You're able to set it up, maybe work with somebody. That's what I work with teachers a lot on, sort of figuring out how they want their grades to come out into our grading system. So down here, we've got some calculated grades. So the teacher is entering off of a rubric something out of 9, and that's not weighted. It's just a number entered in by the teacher, but there's a shadow grade with it, and that's calculated out of 100 based off of actually, I think it's a linear equation there. It recalculates that grade out of 9 into a grade out of 100 that makes sense on our grading scale. So no more student going, what does that mean, 2 out of 9? Does that mean I've completely failed? We are now able to allow a teacher to enter just that 2, just straight off the rubric, and it will put it in as maybe it's 65% or whatever it is, which makes sense out of your ABCDs out of 100. So I'll move along. Another thing on Moodle is the scales. So being able to import and create your own scales. So one of the ones that we have, I don't know if you can see it, there's a star rating down here, which is 2 stars for a pass. So this is actually for, I think, some of the art grading. So we have a form where students post things up, and they're able to rate each other. But with our grading scale, how it works is 60% is your D-, so anything below 60 is failing. Your 60s are generally your Ds, your 70s are your C grades, then your Bs and your 80s, and then your 90s are your As. And so to help a 2-star actually equal to something around the D grade area, we've had to make this new scale, and then you teach the students and the teachers how to use that scale. You're just using the stars, so your 2-star comes out as your 60%. And there's another one down here, AP Psych. So we're taking AP grades. So AP in psychology, they have grades out of 150, and we've got to convert that back down to a grade that makes sense for us. and we're able to do that using using a scale here. So they just enter in the AP grade, and that converts back to a 1 to a 5 in the AP, in the sort of predicted AP grade area. Right. So, good question. I've talked a lot. Do you administer quizzes, or do you work with work in environments where quizzes are used? So I want to go into quizzes now, and I don't know whether I should skip through it quickly or whether. Yeah, good. So Ellen does. Probably should have put up a little poll, and that would have been easy. Mike, hello, Mike. Good. So a few people using quizzes. Dom, not really. Fantastic. So one of the great things, I guess, you know, when you start to use e-learning, for a lot of teachers coming from doing testing and everything in the classroom, one of the great benefits of e-learning is that, hey, it can grade stuff for you. And quizzes is usually the beginning level sort of thing. I have a paper quiz. Can I put it into Moodle so that now it grades for you? So quizzes, Moodle versus Google. And there's a lot here. There's a lot of benefits and downs. There's a lot of benefits in each over the other. So I'll go through them. But Moodle has a really powerful quiz engine. If you're not using Moodle for quizzes, it can really. And I think quiz is almost the wrong term for it. I mean, when you start using quizzes in Moodle, you start going from being a sort of summative end of unit check to also making it sort of powerful learning quizzes, so they can do it at the beginning as sort of give them feedback. They can learn through quizzes. I call them learning quizzes, all the way through to your very traditional summative. And again, when you make things in Moodle, there's a whole load of options for you. So how do the questions behave? Can you see the right answer and check it right there and then? So it becomes kind of like a trivia quiz, you know, where you say, yeah, I think it's that, and then you can check the right answer and get immediate feedback. Or do you have to wait until you finish the whole quiz and then it regrades you, or it grades you and gives you the feedback? Do you show the answers straight away, or do you allow the students to come back to it later? Do they have to wait a day or a few hours before they retry it? There's so many powerful features within the quiz in Moodle. And the types of questions seem to always be growing. So you've got your multiple choice, your short answer. You've got some really powerful things in there. Matching, drag and drop. There's calculated stuff. I showed some of the ideas, some of these calculated multi-choice and calculated simple to one of the math teachers just recently, and he was like, wow, well, this is it, and this is what I'm going to do this year. I'm going to start creating a whole bunch of quizzes whereby kids can learn and practice over and over again. They don't get the same question, but they're practicing the same kind of the same concepts in that. So some great, powerful things. And another thing is, you know, this is actually straight out of one of our older courses, a psychology multiple choice quiz. There's some great statistics, and if you're into that sort of stats analysis, and the bigger picture here being always improving our practice. So how good is our quiz? Does it actually work? I'm not an expert in understanding all of these stats, but what I understand from here, you've got some of these the green lines here are showing how well they are at is this there's I found the zoom feature. Is that zoom for you guys? Is that zoom? There you go. I just forgot the name there for a second, but the discriminative efficiency. So it tells you how well this each question is at determining whether that question determines whether it's they're doing well or not on the test. So some of these questions might be question number 15 and question number 17 here, might need another look at. So there's some fantastic features like that. Now that I found Zoom, you guys are going to get a roller coaster ride. With Google, however, they don't have quizzes built straight into Google Classrooms. But one thing we have found is that doing the Moodle quiz, as you can see, it's serious stuff. And if you want to take your typical paper quiz over to a Moodle quiz, you've got some redesign and a lot of work inputting it. So the interesting thing that we found was teachers were ready to digitize some of their quizzes, but what was the best and easiest way? So we found that actually using Google Forms is a really easy way to do it. What we've done here is Google Forms. If you've ever used Google Forms before, it's a very quick way to make surveys or questionnaires and all of that. And what we've done here is they've actually just, this number one question is actually a snapshot. So it's just a quick picture, you know, taking a snapshot off of your desktop. So they actually have that in, say, a Word file, or even in some of the materials, you know, from textbooks and all. And they're able to take a quick snapshot and then just put in A, B, C, D. And you can duplicate this question and you just change the snapshot. So it's a very quick way to digitize what might have been paper quizzes. And once you've digitized them, you can offer them as a digital resource, and that might be just step one. But from there, we see teachers grow, because obviously then you start going, oh yeah, I can actually offer these, you know, I can break these down and offer them as smaller quizzes. They can do them when they like, and you really get onto that, onto receiving some of the benefits of digitizing your quizzes. So these are all just snapshots. And then Google Forms, here we go, zoom in now. Google Forms has now built in a quiz feature, so you can make any form a quiz. And you can say when to tell the student, and then what happens is each question that you have a snapshot, or you can type in text obviously, but this is the quick way to do it. You can actually say what the answer key is, and you can say it was A. Actually, you can choose multiple ones here, and you can also set, I missed it on the screenshot, but you can set what the grade is as well. And then when the student takes it, after they take it, they can say view your score, and they can get immediate feedback. So it's a very quick way to make a quiz. And from that, the teacher also in the spreadsheet gets a readout of what the answers have been for each of the students taking it. But we also have played with Flubaroo, which is an add-on for Google Sheets. So even if you weren't using the quiz feature within Google Forms, all the answers that students answer on the form come into a Google Sheet, and you can use a Google Sheet add-on called Flubaroo, and it will print out something like this. And what we have here is it'll tell you, for example, the percentage that each kid had. Score was actually from I'm trying to, here we can, and each question, whether they got it right or not, and therefore you can see in this example, question 4, nobody got right, so that might be something we have to go back over with the students. And what we did was we extended this as well, so this was for a grade 3 math test, and they've got some standards here, so we actually typed in these standards. So question 1 and 2 were from a particular standard, question 3 was from a different standard, question 4 from another standard again. And based off of that, we were able to, here we are, I'm going to zoom in down here, we're able to show each student how they're doing against each of those standards. So we were able to build in standards-based reporting, which until now, and I'm really excited about 3.1 and the competencies in Moodle, until now in Moodle has been a really sort of a bit of a challenge for us to report back linked in from things like quizzes and all. So that's a really exciting thing about Google Quizzes. It's very accessible using Google Forms, and you can do things with add-ons that maybe, you know, you can get it to work how you want it to work. Are there any questions so far? Am I going too fast? Anybody fallen asleep yet? Are we all okay? We're nearing close to the end here for me. It's funny when you present online, you've got to leave the right amount of space for people to type. And then you can't leave it too long because maybe they're all asleep, I'm not sure. Okay, all good, fantastic. Good, so that brings me to another area that we've seen really interesting conversation between Moodle and Google, and that's with rubrics. So fantastic thing in Moodle, you can grade using a rubric, so you can create these rubrics and you can actually click on them. Teachers love this. They've been working off paper rubrics, and now students hand in their work either online or offline, but the assignment's been created in Moodle with a rubric, and when they grade it, they're just clicking through on the rubric. They're able to put in some comments, and these are all obviously visible to the student. So that was a great win when we started using rubrics in Moodle. The downside of them was that students couldn't really grade each other or self-assess very easily. And so this is one thing I learned from actually a PE teacher, which is fantastic. They're great at sort of performance-based learning, and this is one of these fantastic lessons I took from a PE teacher. They created the rubric as a Google Doc. And then they got every student to make a copy of this Google Doc, and they obviously got this Google Doc right at the beginning of their unit. So they did this, it might be volleyball for 4 weeks, 4 weeks of focused volleyball, and this is their rubric. So they can see the rubric right from the beginning. And what they would do is they would go in on here, and they would highlight and then comment and say the reason why they thought they were, 14 or 15 or 16 or 18 or whatever it was in each of the areas on the rubric. So it allowed the student to mark and also indicate through using Google Docs, using the comment features, some elements of what they were doing. And as they went through, they would add more comments. So they would even add video. So you could just, they would take screenshots or even from a camera, their phones or whatever, and they would just add the comment with a link to the video, and they would explain, this is where I've improved in my, spiking or whatever it was. And then there is a space at the bottom for the students to put in their final score, and then for peers to also help with the assessing them. So there was that whole idea of peer coaching going on. And then the teacher would come in here and put in their score. This became a really powerful document. And it was definitely, it relied on that sort of fluidity and the ability to comment and use those kind of tools, the collaborative tools, being able to put in links and video in Google Drive and link it back into your comments. So it required that kind of familiarity with that platform as well to be successful. And what that document became was that center of conversation for that unit between that student, between that student and the teacher. So really powerful stuff. Now, how do you bring that back into Moodle? The teacher would just go in after their discussion and everything. They would go in and put the final score back into Moodle, clicking on the Moodle rubric. So the rubric was in both places, but this allowed it to be more accessible by the students and allow them to use that kind of collaboration. Oops, I think, did I go too far there? Yeah. Another thing that we've used with Google is, this is Rubric. So it's part of Doctopus. If I zoom back out, it's Doctopus, and it's something called Rubric, so Google Rubrics. And what you do is you define a rubric first, and then you can apply that rubric, and this is the grading screen. So you can apply that rubric to student work. So if you imagine, this is just a sample that I set up to demo how you could do what we were just talking about using Rubric. So the students might have some work. This could be an essay, or it could be, like here, it's a self-assessment rubric. And then the teacher comes into, so you use Doctopus as a way to, or Google Classrooms, as a way to distribute all of your assignments, so all of your Google Docs to each student. And then you can come in, and I'll just go up to the top here, and you can grade with rubrics. So these are each of your different rows in your rubric, and then these are the different levels for that. So for critical analysis, you might have level 1, level 2, level 3. The interesting thing with this is it allows a teacher to grade on a rubric and I'm going to go into Moodle and Google here, get out a line in a spreadsheet. They're able to get out the score for each of those different areas in a rubric. So in Moodle, one of the challenges is we use the gradebook lots, but what happens is you might have different standards or different areas that you're grading within that one rubric, and it just comes out as one single grade. And actually using Rubric, Doctopus and Rubric, we were able to come up with a way where we could grade using a rubric, keep that collaborative element there, but import all the grades as separate grade items. So here, this is just part of the spreadsheet from the rubric. We could copy this whole spreadsheet. Of course, we'd have the student's email as one of the columns earlier on, and that matches back with the student email inside Moodle. So we could take this and in grades, import from spreadsheet. We can paste that information straight in there, and it would go into the gradebook. So in Moodle, this is in Moodle now, instead of it being one line as a rubric, we could actually match those 5 or whatever, how many rubric lines to a number of different grade items in the gradebook. So this is the start of where we really look at seeing, this is a good example of how Moodle and Google working together helps you sort of solve some of the more complex challenges that you might have as a teacher. How are we doing? Are we all okay? Just checking in again. I know we're sort of ending here, so I'm gonna. Yeah, thank you, Wendy. 5 minutes to go. So I'm gonna leave you with the bigger question, and the bigger question is, do we use everything, or do we use one thing? This is usually the question. Isn't there one system that does it, or are we allowing everybody to use everything and anything? And I'm a big advocate for the everything. So what we've done here, here's another one of these diagrams where you can see there's a whole load of these where there's all sorts of tools out there, and you've got a variety of students and teachers who are familiar with different things. And so why not allow them to use the things that they're good at, or use that latest tool that does it so well? And so I'm a big advocate for all of these sort of things. Exactly. And what I love about Moodle and Google is you can integrate a lot of things. So use Google. Nowadays there's so many tools where you can use Google to log in and authenticate. So use that Google platform for that. And then whenever there is that sort of, there might be a spreadsheet, or so if you're using, for example, Socrative or Edpuzzle or any of these things where you go off and there's actually some information coming back about your learners. So long as you've got their email and so long as you've got their sort of grades coming out in a spreadsheet, you can copy and paste it back into Moodle, which is a very powerful thing to be able to do. And so we're a big advocate for these sort of things. So how I see and how I'll end this is sort of, we look at Moodle and Google. There's so many other examples of this, but we want to use the kind of tools that Google allows us. We want to use the speed of Google. We want to utilize that power of Moodle over the years as a system. What ends up happening, I think, is you have Moodle, your course in Moodle as your sort of portal. And from there, you might break off into Google and do a lot of work. You might break off into a classroom or even a number of Google classrooms. But what you're allowing there is is more possibilities and more opportunities for your students and your teachers. And that's what I'll leave you with. So yeah, the bigger question, everything or one thing? I'd love to hear what you guys think on that question. And there you go. That's me. So questions, comments, go for it, please. Thanks, Trish.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm just going to jump in here and say thank you very much. So it's certainly got a lot for us to think about. And I will say that we've often had the question of whether Google or Moodle, and people have often asked, which one's which. And as like from your presentation, obviously we learned a lot about that, and we can give the correct answers to what people need as well. So thank you so much for that. If you've got any further questions for Andrew, don't forget you can go on the forums and have a chat to him that way. Thanks, Andrew.